Good evening and welcome to the Tewksbury Public Schools special meeting on Tuesday, April 26, 2022, 7 p.m. We're meeting in LG1 at the high school. I'd like to call to order the special school committee meeting at 7:03. If we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And this be a Joni Smith. Could you lead us?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. I just have an announcement to start. The April 26, 2022 special school committee meeting will be recorded and will be posted on the district's website at the conclusion of the 4 interviews for superintendent. Under the open meeting law, the public is permitted to make an audio or video recording of an open session at a public meeting. At this time, I would ask if anyone in attendance is recording tonight's meeting to please identify themselves. Seeing no one, we're going to move on. So I'd like to welcome Nan Skiff Murphy here for an interview. I'd like to thank you very much for spending the day in our district today, visiting our schools. And for anybody who's watching our interview, Ms. Murphy came at around 8:30 this morning, visited with teachers, staff, students, all sorts of stakeholders, finished up with a community meet and greet in our library, and is now here for our interview. So I want to say thank you for that. And just to start, is there anything you'd like to tell us about yourself?
I would. I'd like to tell you a little bit of how I landed here in front of you. I am a lifelong educator. I've been in the classroom. I was in the classroom in Wilmington, Massachusetts for 16 years. Transitioned out of teaching, not because I didn't absolutely love what I was doing, but because around my 10th year I started to understand the decisions that were being made at both the school-based level and central level really affected the work that I was able to do in the classroom and the culture of our teaching and learning community in the schools and among my colleagues. And I really wanted to try to develop a culture in a building that was more aligned to what I felt was good for teaching and learning. So that's kind of what inspired me outside of the classroom. Very lucky, I landed in Lowell, Massachusetts at a K-4 school. I landed there as an assistant principal and was there for 2 years when there was a leadership shift in the district, and the principal that I was leading with had gone to another school in the district to lead an underperforming level 4 school, which had been kind of, in a sense, taken over / supported by the Department of Education, and he was tasked with leading that change in that school, which then I was promoted to the principal of the McAuliffe School. And that summer was one of the first summers before I had actually entered into the role of principalship, was the first summer where accountability data came back to schools in a way that it had never been presented from the state. And what it was showing was that the McAuliffe School was a very low performing school, and that we at that time were 14 out of 14th in Lowell, Massachusetts as an elementary school. So unlike other schools that were not performing well, the designation of high needs level 3 did not come with any additional funding, and we were tasked to do some internal work and to be really out-of-the-box thinkers and to come together as a team to solve some really important questions and problems that we were having in our school. And so, as you might imagine, that's a real culture buster for a team. And it wasn't for a lack of effort on the part of teachers. We just needed a more strategic approach to the work. So I did a lot of reading and research and conversation. I literally cold called principals that did turnaround work across the country, and I asked what helped, what made the difference for you. Somebody led me down the path of the 11 essential conditions for effective schools, and from those I chose 2: aligned curriculum and effective instruction. And we focused on those 2 components in every professional development opportunity that we had. We developed a culture of shared ownership and shared leadership, student-centered. It was about looking at data not through the lens of what's not happening, but what is happening and what can be happening differently. And by teachers coming forward and taking on leadership roles, leading professional development, supporting, coaching teachers. We were designated level 1 few short years later. And at that time, we garnered the light of the state in a different way, and the Commissioner of Education came out to the McCullough School to interview with his team, our teaching staff, and they wanted to know how was this transformational work able to happen with no additional funds on the behalf of the state. And it really came down to culture and just leaning into the work together and a hands-joined approach and trust. And through that work, we were all able to develop the capacity we needed to do differently for kids. Not better, because we were always doing better. We were always doing the best we could, but once we knew what needed to happen differently, we did it differently, and kids responded. After that, the Superintendent of Schools created the position of Director of Accountability and School Improvement at the central office level in Lowell, and I began the work professionally developing 100 leaders once a month over 2 sessions. I also worked with the leadership teams in the lowest performing schools in Lowell. Through that work, I met partners from the Department of Education, and they wooed me away and really were looking for somebody who had my kind of experience to be part of their team. And so I joined the Department of Education for 1 year. I worked in districts with superintendent leadership teams and in school-based with teacher teams in trying to bring new and more effective systems and structures to teaching and learning for more positive outcomes for kids. After being in that work 6 months, I knew I couldn't be disconnected from a district. Felt too hard going in and out of different districts and wanted to return back to a district-based position. So I was able to land as the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning in Marblehead, Massachusetts, navigating the pandemic with a great partner in the superintendent that I have there. We've made some really fantastic headway, built some great relationships there, but I am ready to bring my broad range of expertise to the superintendent's position. And so why Tewksbury? I'm in Tewksbury because I appreciate some of the struggles that the district has been going through, not only mirroring the pandemic struggles of the rest of us across the Commonwealth, but this has been a challenging couple of years for your teachers and your leaders. And that is kind of in my interest in terms of being able to come in and bring about and reestablish some positive intention and a positive culture so that the work can then be again focused on what's best for kids and families. So.
Great, thank you so much. So we've compiled 2 questions each.
Okay.
Our goal is to keep it around an hour, 15 minutes or so. If we can get through our questions, then there'll be some opportunity for some follow-up questions, open-ended questions then. So
Great.
We'll start with Mr. Sullivan.
Great, thank you. And welcome to
Thank
Tewksbury. I hope you enjoyed your day here. I love
did.
this community. As someone that's born and raised here, I'm very proud, and I hope you got a deep sense of the tradition and pride that we have here in Tewksbury. So with that, my first question is, it's an ongoing goal of ours in Tewksbury to support our students in achieving to the best of their ability, especially in light of the last 2 years with the pandemic and the learning loss and the regression that we saw both academically and socially. How would you support our students, both socially and academically, in reaching this goal and ensuring the best outcomes for all our students?
Okay. So great question, and I think it's something that all district leaders are contemplating and constantly talking about, is how do we come back and resurface in a way that's really positive and targeted. So in my conversations with your staff today, both leaders and teachers, the impression that I'm gleaning is that our achievement data doesn't seem to be in as worrisome situation as our social emotional assessment of students. So that the progress monitoring that's happening in classrooms, teachers are paying attention to what kids academically need from them. And I know in reading about Tewksbury, there is already the practice and understanding with professionals and your teaching teams around multi-tiered systems of support. And so I am hearing that those systems and just-in-time scaffolds are being purposefully planned around student data. So I think my anticipation would be you may not find yourself as far behind academically as I know we're finding the same thing in Marblehead, that as we look at data, we're able to really, it's all about what the kids are telling you, and if you're in the moment with that and can make instructional shifts and changes to what kids are getting in the moment, you won't be as far behind. And it sounds to me like that practice is in place across the district to some degree, in some places more than others, but there's that shared understanding that it should be in place for kids. It's the social and emotional piece that everybody is concerned about, and that not just for students, but also for staff. That staff are expressing that it's been a rough couple of years, that there is a need for some support and encouragement and inspiration on their part as well. So as far as being a new superintendent coming in, I think the key to it all is keeping an eye on it and really watching what are the indicators that we need to be paying attention to, and then once we have that information, how are we responding? And if teachers need support with additional time in planning for tiered instruction, it's very hard to do, especially when you have limited time as an educator. So if you're looking at data and you're seeing that your students are showing that they're in many different places, you need coaching, you need somebody to co-plan with you, you need to share your resources and work together to make sure that it's not about one person doing all the work for your own room, but leaning into each other and sharing what you have developed and broadening the capacity for all students and all teachers. So I would certainly be looking and talking with central office supports, with building principals, asking about, what kind of data are we looking at? It's not all we need to be looking at, but it's really important when we're talking about achievement gaps. And so I will say that special education is not the answer to remediation and in just-in-time instruction, that we can't refer students for additional support, that we really need to adjust what we're doing in the classroom in the moment to make sure they don't get to the point where they need to be identified. Special education is really for students who need specially designed instruction, and a lot of conversation that I've had with colleagues is that their referrals for special education are going up because teachers are finding gaps and referring students for delays in what they perceive could be a special education issue. And really, in fact, it's an instructional issue, and we need to get to it in our core instruction so that kids are getting what they need to be able to move on. So I would be having conversations, I would be looking at numbers, I would be talking about trauma-informed instruction, and I think we have a diverse group of needs that maybe a district like you have not seen before. Kids are presenting in very concerning ways. We have to get that information from students. We have to develop avenues for support for them. It has to be transparent and in their face. I know there's a system where, just like a menu where you scan a Q code, there is a Q code for students at high schools where they can scan it and it tells you what counselor is available and what time is that counselor available. So we can't just be waiting for students to come. We have to kind of put resources out there consistently, and not just for the kids. We need to do it for our families because they're struggling in homes, and we may not be seeing those behaviors or those concerning emotions in schools, but the parents are struggling with them at home and looking for supports too. And so how are we supporting our families with our social emotional component as well? But the trauma-informed instruction would certainly be something that I pull forward, and being able to help teachers develop that understanding of what kids need. A pandemic, a global pandemic of a year's isolation is trauma. And so if that's what we're facing, all of our students need a little something different moving forward. So we have to kind of be consistently thinking about what our kids need.
Great, thank you.
And the next question is mine. Have you or how do you plan to prioritize district needs for all faculty with relation to specialized training and workshops that are applicable to their role and help them meet their instructional needs for all students?
I'm going to ask you to
And the
read that again.
questions are right there too if you want to use them.
Okay, maybe I'll do that.
I want to refer to them, so I meant to say that.
Great. So I think prioritizing district needs for faculty is about asking faculty and taking a step back and looking at where we've been as a district, what kind of professional development has already happened, where did it land, did it stick, are we still in practice with that learning? Is it something that was really important and meant a lot to teachers and teachers appreciated, but we haven't revisited, and so it's not at the forefront anymore? So it may be as simple as just going back and pulling it back up and resurfacing it for staff. And if you're doing that, you're looking at who's already doing it well, and maybe that person can then become the professional development provider for the school or for the team. So I think it's important, especially with districts that have, in good years, we have initiatives. But when you've asked teachers to pivot as much as we've asked them to pivot over the last 2 years, everything feels heavier. And so you really have to be strategic, and it has to be prioritized around what students are needing right now. And sometimes, there's other additional learning that maybe has been brought to the district that might need to be paused because it's not what the kids need right now. And I think down the road, we'll have a book, we'll have a resource of how to respond to a pandemic and what kind of things professionally teachers need the following years to close achievement gaps and to meet social emotional needs. We don't have that right now. We're writing the book right now. So it's really about just being cognizant of what kids, the data is showing, what teachers are saying they need. We need to pay attention to them as well. Their voices, I've heard the expression from teachers across the district today a number of times, I just want to feel heard. And so that tells me they want a voice in what the professional learning is. They maybe have the expertise to be able to be heard in a forum in front of colleagues. And so I'd really be strategic in terms of eliciting support and kind of looking at what historically we've done. You don't want to pause something that has gained momentum and that teachers are really working on. But then there's also the critical time that we're in, and everything we're doing in teaching and learning right now has got to be about making sure our kids recover.
Great, thank you so much. And then Mr. Parsons.
Thank you. So what have you done in your current district or past experience to make your special education department work better?
Okay.
How have you looked at ways to, 1, contain costs, and 2, how have you balanced the needs of students with the fiscal responsibilities of the schools?
Great. So one thing that I have done as a principal, we I developed a special education professional learning community. So we often talk about PLCs. We often talk about teachers getting together in professional learning groups and having conversations. What I noticed as a principal was it was the core teachers and then the special education teacher kind of just listening, trying to think about how they're connecting the work to all of their different various students. And what wasn't happening for that group of professionals was a time for them to talk about their expertise. They have a different level of expertise, and that needs to be challenged, and it needs to be fed, and it needs to be appreciated, and it needs to be part of a group with other people with the same level of expertise. So I prioritized that for our special education team in my school, and they met and they were able to talk about testing. They were able to talk about how they're writing IEPs. They were able to talk about how are they, what kinds of assessments are they finding that are benefiting kids, and and then I attended those so that they felt they were having the same kind of attention and professional environment as the classroom teachers were having. And I felt like that really elevated the work that we did as a special education team. And unfortunately, our students with special needs across Massachusetts don't do well. They are not doing well. They are lagging behind their peers. And with additional support and with specialized instruction, it shouldn't be the case. So how can we do something differently and give our special educators maybe differentiated professional development to move our students that need that specially designed instruction? I still see in the district that I'm currently in, professional development for our special educators is oftentimes the same professional development for the staff. And we really need to shift away from that. And as the director of special education and I continue to talk and collaborate, we have brought in a couple of opportunities just for our special education team so that they have that opportunity together. We haven't gotten to the point where it's consistent and we're calling it professional learning community because that hasn't been established, but that's where we're hoping to go with it. The other thing in terms of connecting our special education with the mainstream population of teachers, we flipped it. In our last experience as a whole district of learning, our special education teachers were going to have professional development around ableism and how you can make schools more accessible for students with disabilities. And as I was listening to the director tell me about what she was bringing in for her teachers, I said, that's an everybody learning opportunity. All of our teachers need that wonderful, that we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Ableism is that. And so we brought that to all of our teachers. And so it kind of went both ways. It was a nice opportunity for mainstream teachers to join the work of special education teachers instead of the other way around. So I'm going to make sure I get all your question here. Have you looked at ways to contain costs and have you balanced the needs? Okay, so my work in Lowell, I partnered, I didn't partner, I assisted the director of special education at the time, was talking about some of the students that were being placed in an out of district placements with severe autism. And she was sharing with the senior leadership team that she really didn't feel like the programs that the kids were going to were stellar. And so that started the conversation. Could we do that? Can we do that in district? Is that a possibility? Could we create our own program for students with severe autism that we feel is stellar? And long-term planning led to yes. And the program has now a wait list from other districts looking to come and pay to send their students to the Lowell Public Schools sub-separate program. So that was a win-win in terms of our kids got our goal is always kids, right? So what's the best programming for our students? And it turned out it could be within our own district at a savings. And so fiscally kind of looking at that led us to a better solution for our students and families. Another example of that in working with the Lowell Public Schools, when I was part of the leadership team at central office, we had a 45-day placement for behavioral students that needed behavioral step away from the class, from the school-based, little intensive behavioral management, teaching, small group review, and then the goal was re-entry back into the schools to re-enter back into their programming, mainstream programming. And that program was not working. So we had a 45-day program that wasn't working, and the way we knew that is kids were coming back and not successful, or kids weren't coming back at all. They were staying over there at this in another facility. And so we talked about how can we do better for kids there? And so we ended up closing the facility and finding smaller programs that were school-based and housing smaller groups of students in schools and saving the cost of what it took to rent that space. State remained the staff remained sacred. The staffing followed the students to schools, but we just saved the space. And I wasn't there long enough. I'm hoping that worked well for kids. I haven't heard differently, but that was another kind of fiscal decision that turned out to be best for kids.
Thank you. And Kayla?
Thank you. All right, so I have a scenario type of question here. So
Okay.
you're proposing a highly controversial program. The school committee or your staff is seemingly divided on the issue, and a group has formed to oppose the program.
Okay.
You strongly believe that this new program will be highly beneficial to students. What steps would you take in this type of a scenario?
Okay. So, been there, had that happen. I would say the best way out of a situation like that is communication and transparency. And having the opportunity for people who, if I feel that strongly, then I really want everybody else to understand the why behind that. So I would take it on the road. I would offer community forums. I would visit every, do you call them PACs here or PTOs? So as they meet monthly in their schools with their principals, I would join. I would be able to, I would take every opportunity I could to help people understand why this is best for kids. Maybe even providing an opportunity to compare what is in place now versus what we're trying to bring in. Sometimes the new seems scary, but when you look at what's in place now, you really see the benefits of what's coming. And yes, it seems hard. Yes, it seems like this will be different, but when I look at how it compares to what's in place now, I have a better understanding of why it's so invaluable and important. So, and I think you have to plan very strategically for that, and this is where I have made a mistake in the past, is I have gone out with an idea and presented an idea without communicating it first. So the more you can communicate the work as you're piloting a new program, as you're considering changing something, the more people are involved, the more you're talking about it at school committee meetings, keeping it on the agenda so that when it finally shifts and that recommendation is made, everybody understands how we got there and why it's important and has had a say. And you're never going to get to 100%. It's just you want as many people on board, and if you can, get there, that's the best way to go.
Thank you.
And Mr. Russo?
Thank you. Excuse me. So my question is, over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of polarizing views that have emerged about parents having a say in their child's education. What are your feelings towards this, and how will you work to ensure that parents are having their voices heard?
Okay. So I think it's really challenging because I feel there are so many different hot topics right now among our parent population. There's a lot of misinformation out there as well about different things and how it relates to our curriculum and our instruction and what is actually taking place in schools and what isn't taking place in school. One of the things that I was talking about with some staff recently is around parents. They are saying, there's been a lot of parent engagement in a way that's never really happened before. And part of that is for almost a year, parents were in the classroom. Students were working remotely at home, and the parent was in the classroom. And so there was a window into what happens in an instructional day, and I think in some ways, parents are missing that connection. And so they're looking for ways to stay reconnected with the schools. We've got to provide them healthy ways for that to happen, and positive ways. So I think to answer your question, it's about making yourself accessible to hearing all different stakeholder voices and opinions. And then again, communicating what is in schools, why it's in schools, how it connects to standards, how it connects to the diversity, equity, and inclusion work, making those connections to what the role of the school is and what the role of the school is not. And providing people to be heard from the community as well, so that they're not feeling like they need to call you, that they need to come to you to express an opinion, but they feel like they've heard, the superintendent heard them, and that we were able to have a dialogue, and there's at least an understanding of that topic in relation to schools. And I was able to kind of clarify some of the misconceptions before any of that gets to you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Sullivan.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. One of my favorite topics here. Within the next year, we've been very fortunate in Tewksbury to have the great support that we do from our community leaders and also our taxpayers. We're going to be opening up a brand-new state-of-the-art elementary school for grades 2 through 4.
Yep.
So my question would be, how would you successfully collaborate with stakeholders in the school community to assure a successful opening of the new school and the combining of grades 2 through 4? What considerations would you apply to the process to minimize educational impact for those students?
Awesome. So fortunate. So beautiful. I got to kind of peek around it. Wasn't able to obviously go in it, but it was nice to see it. I guess one of the benefits is that I am able to come to you with having just done that. So Marblehead has just completed a beautiful $55 million elementary school. We combined 2 schools, pre-K to 3, to form one elementary school, and that transition happened I think it's the middle of October. So we started we were hopeful for the new years to begin in the new year and make a smooth transition, but we had to start mid-year, and similar to the scenario that you'll be facing. So I think planning for that in advance, talking about collaborating with our transportations, our facilities director, our town managers, our police chief, being able to make sure that the safety structures are in place and that we understand what some of the basic and most important pieces of student safety. And I'll give you an example of where we fell short in Marblehead. We had a gas leak probably a month into it. Nobody knew where to go. We had not determined the evacuation plan for a school. So we had buses coming. We did not have a thoughtful plan of what grade goes to what school. In the former schools, one of the schools, the students were taught to walk to another school. That was not the case here. They had to get on a bus. That wasn't a reality. So kids were getting on the bus telling me, no, I walk somewhere. And I'm like, not now that you're at the Brown. Now that you're in the Brown, you get on a bus and you go to a new school. So we hadn't anticipated that. So trying to get ahead of some of those things, but then also it's a really unique and important time for your school leaders. You're bringing together teaching teams that maybe have not taught together before. Maybe I don't know the dynamic, you might have people that are teaching new grade levels. There's a tremendous, I'm projecting here, tremendous amount of technology in your new building, and teachers will want to use it immediately, but they won't know how. And so making sure that their laptops are all pre-loaded with all of that connectivity, with the ability to connect to the smart board, with the ability to connect to the different technology capacities in the rooms. So thinking forward like that as well. It's also important to remind teachers that all the new and rich technology is awesome, but sometimes it goes down. And so what do we do in that event? We're so reliant, and in these new situations in Marblehead, they have 3 different projecting points in a classroom, one being outside of the classroom. So a small group can be outside of the classroom with the door closed and still see the teacher and access instruction. So if that cable is not connecting, what's the plan for that? So kind of talking about some of those things and really giving teachers time to get to know each other and build a team and really we sent the team to Project Adventure. So the new staff all loaded a bus in August before they transitioned and had a day of fun together and just got to know each other personally so that this team could come together and really form a second family, which is what we always like to try to establish in school environments, especially elementary school environments. So I have not seen evidence of a struggle instructionally. Teachers have taken their curriculum and really they're teaching in a new environment, but if anything, it's elevated through projection, through some of the project-based spaces that we have. We have a STEM room that we're building out, so, capitalizing on some of those internal resources. But we really encourage teachers to just start slow. Don't feel like you need to blow out and go into all these different spaces. Just transition your kids, get them used to the school, get them used to the spaces, and then broaden out as they're ready.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next question's mine.
Okay.
We have received lots of feedback on the wishes of many stakeholders to
Yeah.
evaluate and improve on communication across the district. Can you speak to how you have or how you intend to be a leader that seeks input, then processes and communicates back to the community?
Great. So my first point of communication is visibility. So you get more information as a leader, even as a teacher, when you're in the community, when you are attending events, when you are supporting teachers in professional learning, you are learning alongside them, you're hearing side conversations, you're gathering all kinds of information. The status quo question to communication is my door is always open. But when your door is open, it implies people have to come to you and cross over it. And that's not always a comfortable space when you're a central office staff member. So really trying to be in other people's space, being where people are comfortable, being where families are playing, sitting outside in the sun during recess after school, or at the playground after school where there's lots of parents meeting and talking and having fun, saying hi, introducing yourself to folks. So that's my first point of communication. And then being really consistent. I think in Marblehead, one thing the superintendent and I do well is we communicate consistently. So parents know every Friday there's a letter out of central office. They know that they've learned to anticipate what kinds of things are on it, what's happening the next week, what's been celebrated in schools, what are some of the athletic events coming up, what are some PD opportunities for teachers. So being consistent and reliable. so that they know where the systems are for information. And then also hosting opportunities for families to and stakeholders to come and talk. So we, in the district, have coffees, superintendent coffees, where, sometimes there's nobody and sometimes there's people. But it's in the newsletter, it's posted once a month, it's an opportunity for people, it's always in a school. So, just having no one way is the answer. A lot of people are busy working families. They need various points of communication and various ways to get in touch and communicate what's important to them. And so kind of making as many of those realistic opportunities. You don't want to start off strong and then not show up at something, because that says something about your commitment to being there for families. So if I'm going to make it, I will be there to hear it.
Great, thank you. And then Mr. Parsons, number 8.
Do you want to take a second, grab any water, take a break or anything?
I'm good, thank you.
You've been doing great. Okay. So these past few years have taken a toll on our school community. Several relationships between different stakeholder groups are arguably strained. The argument could be made that these less than ideal relationships have created challenges for our families, students, educators, school staff, and residents. There is a sentiment that our current relationships have made the work of providing for our students in an economically responsible manner more difficult than it could be. How would you restore relationships between stakeholder groups around the common goal of providing the best education for students possible?
So I've spent the whole day here, and that conversation resonates everywhere. That the teachers, I think if there's anything that you can take that is positive out of such a difficult and trying time for a school community, is that people are ready for change. They're ready for the narrative to change. I do not get the sense from the parents that I've talked to, the community members that I've spoken to, and the teachers, that anybody is not willing to take that next step forward. I don't feel that there are still heels dug in, that the work that has happened in the past is in the past, and that this is an opportunity for change and a shift in thinking. I don't think getting to the point where we're talking about what's best for students is going to be hard, because I think all of those people think that way already. It's just they haven't been dialoguing about it in the right ways. But I think everybody and every side of every issue has the student lens. It's about finding a forum to have that conversation in a way that everybody feels heard and that is solution-oriented. It's not going to happen overnight, but it happens experience after experience. And if you're in the work and you're being able to have those conversations and you're visible and you're hosting events, you're bringing people together in a positive way, it's going to happen, because from what I hear from people, they want it to happen. They're ready for that change, which is really important, which is a great place to be as a district when the people that are involved are looking for somebody to change the narrative. So I think every conversation that I had in the classrooms, students are forward. People are students are, this district is student-facing. Everybody is talking about kids. Classrooms are doing what's right for students. There's partner work. There's students working. There's guided instruction. There's teacher-led instruction. There's turn and talk. There's a lot of student discourse. The teaching and learning, from what I could tell in a short visit to schools, is strong. So I think the conversation is going to, through a healthy, trusting relationship, it's going it's going to pivot pretty quickly back to what's best about kids.
Thank you. And Ms. Biagioni-Smith.
So you have spoken a lot about this today. Earlier in our meet and greet, you talked about professional development and
Yep.
the importance of it. What role do you believe the staff should play in the decision-making process? And how have you involved your staff in the past in this process, in the decision-making process?
So I love the saying, it's not mine, but somewhere along my life in education, I heard the answer is always in the room. And I've found that to be true. So there are teachers who are passionate about certain things. You're going to have teachers that are amazing teachers of literacy. They understand phonetics, they understand decomposing words, they understand structures, syntax, and they're amazing. You have other teachers that are really great and creative with ways to get students to show what they know. They may never give a paper pencil assessment. All of their assessments are project-based. That students have a menu. They can choose a different way to show what they know. There's so much creativity and great thinking that sometimes we just need to step back and ask, what are you really good at? And what might your colleagues benefit from your level of expertise, and how can we make that happen? It's been hard to do that the last couple of years because of COVID and because of isolation and because we've been, the state provided the acceleration roadmap for people that kind of trumped maybe some of the work that they were trying to think strategically about doing in place of more scripted plan. But I think teachers have a lot of voice, should have a lot of voice in what is professionally provided for them. That being said, there are things that need to be accomplished, and your beliefs around progress monitoring might not match what the district expectations are around data analysis and progress monitoring. If it's a shared strategic initiative and it's been communicated to staff, they need to be able to connect what they're doing to the initiative. And that's the important piece. So if it's coming from the district as an initiative, teachers have to see their place in it in terms of what's happening in their classrooms. If it doesn't affect classrooms, there has to be more of a variety for differentiation. We have educators that are on all different kinds of a spectrum of different expertise. We have new teachers, we have master teachers, we have people in between, we have people who have shifted grade levels, we have people who have gone from special education into the mainstream room. Those are all differentiated needs. So listening to what your teachers feel like they need and then providing the forum for it. So a lot of districts are going towards Ed Camp, which is a really great way of providing teacher-led professional development where you kind of create a menu, and I might facilitate data analysis using a particular rubric that we have at schools. And if people are interested, they come to mine. If you're interested, you might go to somebody else's. But having work that connects to what everybody pretty much needs and then differentiate it and let teachers lead it and be part of it is really important as well. So teacher-led PD is my favorite. But that being said, there are important things that need to happen at a district level to calibrate understanding across the district. And that has to happen as well. There needs to be a balance.
Thank you.
And Mr. Russo.
Thank you. So with property tax going up in Tewksbury every year, just like every other town, by approximately 2.5%, and over 60% of those funds going towards our schools, how will you ensure that the budget you are putting forward takes into account the level of services that Tewksbury residents in many cases have come to expect, as well as ensuring a budget that focuses on student achievement?
Okay, I'm going to take a second.
Yeah, break that down, sure.
Just read that over. I love that every question you have is anchored in student achievement. That's not always the case. So I appreciate that a budget question, really the outcome of that is kids.
Right.
That makes the perfect sense. I think building a budget is, again, going back to focus. So what is it that we're trying to do? What do we need to do differently? What do we have the capacity internally to do? And what don't we? That is, you know, in across all areas. So involving your principals in those budget conversations. What are your priorities as a school? Asking principals to ask teachers, what are your priorities in the schools? And this goes back to the question around teachers being decision makers. Teachers need to feed the budget. They need to be able to see their needs being met through the budget. And I don't think that's always the case, because the budget is one of those things that kind of happens to a district of teachers as opposed to as the result of a collaborative effort with teachers. So you want to be fiscally responsible. 70%, 80% of a school-based budget is salaries. So really, we're talking 30% or 20, 20 odd. That's really not a lot of money when you think about it. And when you think about all the buildings you have across the district, all the staff you have across the district, all the materials you have across the district. So you have to be very strategic. And sometimes that's looking at what you have and maybe updating an addition of something as opposed to buying an entire program. But it should all be connected to school improvement plans, which is connected to your district improvement plan, so that we're all working in the same direction and we don't have different things being prioritized in different schools, because then what one school deems as important to them, if it's not shared across the district, chances of it getting into the budget are slim. So you kind of have to have that collaborative process, and it has to involve parents. Parents need to be able to hear if you're looking to raise your property taxes. Again, if parents can understand the why behind it and what kids are going to get, they're going to go out there and communicate to their neighbors and to their senior citizens that they associate with, and it's going to help them communicate what that money is actually going towards. So it's messaging, it's purposeful planning, it's about needs-based. I'm very grounded in what we need and not looking at the next best thing that other districts or other people are investing in. It's about what works here and what the needs are of our kids and teachers. And you'll never get a budget from me that has things in it that are plants to take out in the event that we get it's really, this is what our team is presenting to you. This is what your team of leaders is saying their schools need in terms of their facilities. This is what your teachers are saying they need in terms of instructional support. And recognizing we partner with the town. The kids access the recreation department, they access a lot of great town components for their learning as well outside of schools. So it's a partnership. It really has to be kind of connected to understanding what priorities are on the district side and the town side, and working collaboratively. And there may be years where you can offset some of those property taxes by compromise, and we can pump the brakes on this on the town side so you can get this on the school side, and then vice versa down the road. So kind of working collaboratively with the town would be important as well.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
So we have plenty of time. So are there any follow-up questions from anybody? Anything additional?
Yeah, I guess just a follow-up. So you mentioned previously in the community meet and greet and shared with us your resume. you talked a little bit about sort of a 5-year strategic plan in Marblehead, and I guess I'd just like to understand a little bit, because I know you've only been there a couple years, so obviously you've been working in tandem with your superintendent there
Correct.
today.
Yep.
And I think that they're just as new maybe, or same tenure. So how do you sort of, when you talk a little bit about a 5-year plan, it's hard to sort of materialize sort of the output of that when you yourself haven't been there for 5 years. So I guess I'd just like to understand a little bit about sort of why you're looking to, looking for greener pastures at this point in Tewksbury and potentially others.
So how we entered into that work as a new leadership team was an expectation upon hire that would be something that we, as an administrative team, were tasked with. The school committee wanted a 5-year strategic plan, that had not been in place in years, and that they wanted something to guide our work and to be able to measure our success by, and to help teachers understand and our community stakeholders understand what is the work for the next 5 years. We entered the community after contention. So there was a very contentious departure of the administrative team, and we came in new. And so that was one of the things that was tasked of us, to work together with a variety of different stakeholders to determine the future of where we're going to go and kind of focus the work in the district. Both the superintendent and I had done that in previous districts, led that work ourselves in terms of developing those plans, but felt that where we were both new, we wanted to engage with the community and not lead that work. So we actually had a facilitator come from the Department of Education and take our team through that work. So we developed a team of parents. We had town representatives in terms of Board of Select, Chair of the Chairman of the Board of Selectmen was a member. We had a huge team that worked on that. Then our team broke up into different pillars. So my pillar, obviously, as the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, was driving and planning for 5 years teaching and learning, developing the scope and sequence, things like creating curriculum maps, taking a look at our report cards, professional development, looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion, and where does that fit in our curriculum. So as your point to me is, why leave that work? It's one pillar, which I love, and I'm really good at it. I know teaching and learning really, really well. But I'm ready to kind of have other responsibilities and to be able to take my level of expertise and help support other people that have pillars. So to kind of be the overseer and manager of all the pillars, and then support the people in the role of facilitating that work. So, that's your central office team, it's your principals, it's your partnering with the chief of police, partnering with your Board of Selectmen, your town meeting members. So I guess that's where I am professionally. I'm ready to do that. I wasn't as rewarding as that work is. I've kind of done it before, and so now I'm ready to do something different. That still includes it,
Sure.
but in a different way.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I think I have a follow-up touch as a couple, hopefully.
Great.
I think we talked about recovery, academic and social. How long do you think that needs to be prioritized due to the pandemic? Obviously, and not just, when the kids weren't in school, there was obviously the special ed piece where, we couldn't get services to people, kids couldn't come in and get services. So I'm just wondering what your thinking is. I know we're kind of writing the book as you quoted.
Yep.
How long would you anticipate, that recovery process to take place, or if that we need to really prioritize to get students back?
I think there are very few positive things that can come out of a global pandemic. I think really strategic thinking and planning in instruction is going to last. So I think districts that maybe haven't had structures for looking at data are now looking at data. That's just best practice. That's just good teaching. So I'm hoping some of those systems that we have done to take such a important and close look at achievement gaps stay in place. That's good for kids, and it's good for being able to understand where our curriculums are lacking and where they're really shining, and where we need to remediate with different materials. I hope that stays in place. I think that's really a great way to look at teaching and learning. The collaboration that we've done, being able to utilize Zoom. So I have second grade teachers in 2 different buildings across the schools, across 2 different schools, but they Zoom once a week to be able to co-plan together in 2 different buildings. That's a practice that I hope stays, because if we remove that technology or that mode of communication that we adopted during the pandemic, those teachers will never see each other, because there's just not time built into the calendar for 2 schools to plan together. So there are wins that we would want to keep present, but the urgency around talking about the pandemic, it's time for that to change. As we transition back into a school year, hopefully unmasked, hopefully with low COVID concerns, it's time to just get back to the work that we do and heal from some of that and provide kids those. I've been in Marblehead 2 years. I have never been to an assembly. That's unheard of, bringing those things back as soon as we can. And if they're not already happening in schools, it could be. I haven't been to one yet in Marblehead. They could be happening here. But the whole school assemblies are important to school community, and they're important to kids. And so kind of getting back to those best practices as well is important. So I would look at what is important that we maintain and what we have learned and taken from, but then kind of that's becoming the way, and that's part of our best practice, but then kind of shedding some of that urgency around the pandemic. I do not mean to imply that our kids social emotionally are ready for that. I mean, we will need to gauge that by what kids tell us. That's going to last as long as behaviors and indicators of concern last. So if that's a year, if that's 2 years, if we're bringing in social structures to teach kids certain skills that they missed in their year of absence or 2 years, then we'll just do that based on what we need, what the kids are showing us that they need. But I think a lot of us that are leading education are ready to just get back to leading education, and to really start having conversations about the work as opposed to how the work is related to the pandemic.
Great, thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like to just, and I'm going to go back a little bit, just to follow up a little on what Mr. Russo was asking about your 5-year plan and vision and all of that. So I've been trying to form the question in my mind about how I want to phrase it, but I've read your documentation that you submitted, listened to you talking. You've done a lot of work to fix problems.
Yep.
You've gone into Lowell and you fixed the problems that they were having there.
Yep.
You went to DESE and helped to build out whatever it was that you were doing there, and then moved to Marblehead to
Yep.
fix more problems.
Yep.
As you move to Tewksbury, potentially, and not necessarily fix any problems, but where do you see yourself and where do you see the district going once you resolve some of the things that we've already talked about, the communication and healing staff and relationships? What then?
So I think a lot of what you're interpreting as fixing problems is about looking at systems and structures and taking an analysis of what the needs are and then putting supports in to address the needs. That can happen anywhere. That can happen in any district. I don't think you could find a district that would onboard a new superintendent and just say, keep everything exactly the same. It's going so well. There's always room for change and growth. That's an opportunity for growth. So I wouldn't look at it as fixing problems. I would look at it as prioritizing initiatives. One thing I've heard from teachers is there's a lot of different initiatives. Figuring out a way to include more teacher voice. Teachers are saying, and I've learned from my own experiences, that the work in a district is 100 times more successful when you have your stakeholders invested in the work and interested and behind it. So I would be looking for ways to, with the senior leadership team, how are we including teacher voice in what these plans are, and kind of using that as the overarching question that we ask when we're making decisions at the central office level. So that will enhance a lot of relationships, because when you're talking about that as a leading question at the central level, those people at the central level, when they're working in schools, are asking teachers those questions. What do you need? What's your feedback? What's the direction we're going? So it's not so much in Tewksbury. I'm an insider. I said Tewksbury. I learned that today, too. Don't say it the wrong way. So I think it's really about kind of aligning priorities and then communicating the priorities and getting people on board with what the work is.
Great. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you very much. Yeah,
Okay.
that answers quite a bit. Thank you.
Mr. Parsons?
I have a couple. So I just want to turn to question number 3 about the special education piece.
Great.
How to make special education in town work better. I just wanted to ask a follow-up question on your work in Lowell and your involvement in developing your own out-of-district placement. I'm just curious, how long did that take? And what were the investments for that monetarily and labor-wise?
So I want to be clear that I assisted in that work. That work was driven by a genius special education director that had that foresight, and I supported her in that work. It was driven budgetarily. So we had to, at that time, I believe the number was $6 million that we were tasked with cutting that particular year. It was a really difficult time financially for the city of Lowell. And so we were looking at ways, again, you look at your budget through the lens of what's best for kids, God bless you, and trying to remove things out of necessity that don't touch students directly. So, other kinds of things, but you get to a point when you're cutting $6 million that can't happen all the time. And so the question was, where is a lot of our money going that could be maybe spent in a different way? And when we look at special education, it's a huge part of the budget. So when you're looking to cut a substantial amount of money, you have to look in all department areas, and special ed had a wide area. I want to say the process, the conversation started, it probably from conception to signing a lease, because I left when we secured the space. I did not see the students reemerge. I think that was 2 years. And I think now, with the foresight of being able to host other district students, I think they're seeing that benefit now. I think that financial benefit is starting to flourish. So we didn't see that right out of the gate, because it was just the students that we brought back into the district. But as we secured spots for those kiddos, then we opened up the programming, and now other schools are starting to send students, and now what was anticipated and planned is coming to fruition there. But again, I've been out of the district a while, so I'm going on what was, my understanding at the time.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. And then just one more.
Yeah.
Education's hard. I think we can all agree on that
Yep.
here. What keeps you coming back?
I'm driven to just do best for kids. I think I was with I met with the members of the CPAC, your presidents of the co-president of your CPAC, your special education parent organization. And we had 2 students from the high school join us, and they were also there for the conversation. And at the end of the conversation, we had one of the parents said, I want to just thank the students that are in the room, because when I see what the potential, what comes out of Tewksbury High, it makes me so proud, and it makes me feel like my kid's going to be okay when I see the product. And she literally had tears in her eyes. And that's how I feel. I feel like the work we do matters. It matters to families. It matters to kids. And I've been in the field long enough where now kids that I had at a young age are really flourishing as adults. And that, to know that I had a part in that process, and means something to me and keeps me coming back.
Thank you.
Great. So at this time, I'd like you to feel free to share anything with us that we haven't already asked you about, or some
Okay.
closing remarks.
I just want to, I hope that I've been able to communicate to you today how phenomenal your staff is. They are, it's been an absolute pleasure to go through your schools and to see such enthusiastic teachers and learners. You have students that are engaged. Whenever I go into a classroom that I'm not prepared to visit, I always find a student and I ask them, what are you learning and why? In every single classroom, the student was able to tell me. That means clear goals, clear objectives are being articulated to students, and they know what they're doing in the classroom. That doesn't happen all the time. And so that was really telling to me about how invested the teaching staff is here. So that was really encouraging to hear and see from students and teachers just the capacity that you have in buildings. It's great. But I do have just a quick way to wrap things up. As you know, the facilitator of this search did a survey of your community and asked all your different stakeholders to have a part and a say in what some of the work they see happening and what they're looking for in their next superintendent. And I was able to get a copy of that survey and look over that data before I arrived. And you had 438 community members complete the survey. And your stakeholders were asked to identify important, critical, current issues that will be facing the next leader in your district. And the top 4 in order of priority are the social and emotional well-being of students and staff, curriculum development and instruction, addressing district and school culture, and improving staff relations. There was another question on the survey that asked your stakeholders to identify specific areas of expertise that they were hoping that the new superintendent would come with. And the top 4 in order of priority: able to develop and direct an effective administrative team, understands and recognizes good teaching, successful creating a supportive work environment, maintains visibility and is accessible to staff, parents, and community. And I will add, able to facilitate a healthy pandemic recovery, which will include the return to joy, innovation, and excitement across the Tewksbury teaching and learning community. So I hope throughout this process, throughout our conversations, throughout the time that I've spent with you, that I've been able to articulate how my skill set fits into what your stakeholders are looking for. There's no perfect candidate. There's no golden ticket here. It's about the work, and it's about being able to get into the conversation and being part of solutions that will bring a district forward. So with that, I'm going to say thank you for having me and for hosting me and for the great day that I had here in Tewksbury. And I wish you the best. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any closing remarks from anybody?
Well, please drive safe.
Thank you very much. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
A second?
Just through you, Madam Chair, is there anything with the future dates that you need to go
Oh,
through?
I can announce them, yeah. We do have future school committee dates on April 27th. It's a special school committee meeting for another superintendent interview. On April 28th, special school committee meeting for a superintendent interview. And May 3rd, special school committee meeting for a superintendent interview. On May 5th, we'll have a special school committee meeting with deliberations and a vote. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make said motion.
Second.
And all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. And we now adjourn at
8:18.
8:17.
8:17. Thank you.
Awesome.